Hello, I'm Chris Slisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore concepts that allow us to broaden our view of the world. You'll hear interesting topics, meet fascinating guests, and discover who you really are. Using the time-tested practices of astrology, you'll learn how to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Astrology, art, and spiritual adventure on Turning of the Wheel TV with Chris Slisher. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Slisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. Spiritual adventure is a very wide subject category and it allows us to span into a lot of different topics. We're going to enter into a very unusual topic today, one which I'm sure some of you have heard about, but maybe not quite familiar. We're going to be talking about crop circles. Crop circles are a phenomenon that has fascinated me since I first learned about them. And I've got a specialist here who's flown in from Ireland, not in my count, but nonetheless I'm taking credit for it, to be on the show today to talk about crop circles. His name is Peter Tad. Welcome to the show, Peter. It's great to have you on. I'm glad you flew. You came from the homeland where crop circles originate, and I find that fascinating. I've always been impressed by the mathematical precision of the crop circles and fascinated by this fact that this phenomena even occurs. And I'm wondering if you could just give us some sort of backdrop as to what they are. I mean, this is such a phenomenal thing. Those of you who don't know what a crop circle is, I'm going to show this real quickly. This is an idea. Now, this is taken probably from a helicopter or an airplane of some sort that has, and it gives you an idea. These are enormous patterns in the fields, primarily in England and Ireland, correct? Right. And we'll get into that. And they are phenomenal constructions that have geometrical precision to them, as you can see. And those are people inside the circle there. So those little dots that you see are people inside the circles. That'll give you an idea of the dimensions that we're talking about, how large they are. These are remarkable. These appear, and Peter's going to give us a brief introduction into what they're all about. So what's going on, Daddy-O, with all these circles?
The crop circle phenomena is, as you said, a bit of a mystery for all of us, even when we go into them, because the feel of them is something extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And you're right about the size. The crop circles, you can tell the size of them when you look at them, if you see them on the internet, by counting the lines that are going through the crop circle. Those lines are the tractor lines. And those are 75 feet apart. So you just count them and you can see that the one you just showed, that's over 200 feet. The largest crop circle that appeared on Milk Hill was 900 feet in diameter, made of 440 circles. And it appeared overnight. And there was an engineer, a hydrologist, who calculated that it would take a dozen people 2 weeks to make that circle. And so this becomes the big question. How is it that these things happen in an instant when they are so vast? And also, when you go into the circle, what you see on the ground is you see the actual lay of the crop. The crop tends to be either wheat, which is generally the one that they choose, but also barley. In the early part of the year, in the spring, they'll use rapeseed. Mm-hmm. And the precision is what is just a knockout. That is, in itself, like you say, many people have thought these were man-made and they were some sort of a prank to sort of bring attention to or inflate the woo-woo factor of what was going on here. But in fact, these happen overnight. They occur in this geometric pattern. It almost looks to me as if there's some sort of a pulse or a waveform coming from the Earth that creates this pattern. Do you know the specifics about how these are created or what we think they are? Unfortunately, yes. The way crop circles have been captured in terms of they're being made, there have been a couple of very rare videos. And what has appeared are spheres of white light that enter into the field and skim over the tops of the crop.
Oh, so it happens from the top down.
It does. And what's being used here is a kind of two-dimensional telemetry and a kind of microwave heat, because what takes place within the stem of each of the stems of the wheat or the grain is at the nodes. So they're like knuckles. They're
Right.
nodes on the stem.
Where they have...
And the nodes bend.
Okay.
The ones that are man-made, the actual stem is broken. So I've gone into those that are called hoaxes. And the hoaxes tend to be very simple, not very elegant. Sometimes they're simply uninteresting. But you can see how the actual wheat, for example, is trampled down. That is not the case in a genuine circle.
And I imagine that the man-made ones are nowhere near as precise mathematically. I mean, I think if we went in and measured different pieces of this, we would find that the dimensions are all accurate to each other. So this is what it seems like, almost like a, nature or some outside force working in a way that is like a mapping machine or a plotter of some sort.
Yes.
Sort of a esoteric geometric plotter that comes from someplace.
If you, your listening audience, viewing audience is very interested in pursuing this, I would suggest a website that is called cropcircleconnector.com. And these two guys, Mark and Stuart, have been at this for decades. And what you will find there are not just only the crop circle pictures, aerial photographs, ground shots, but also some of the calculations that some people are very good at that, and I'm not, but they take the measurements you talk about, and then they come up with these extraordinary understandings of the geometry that's involved. And a lot of these formations really are based on sacred geometry, and on also a principle that's called squaring the circle. And that we can see in Stonehenge, and we can see that in the Great Pyramid. And many of these formations in England in particular tend to locate around these ancient sites.
What do you think is what's at play here? What's at work here? What's the sort of the overarching explanation for this? I mean, this is a phenomenon that is almost, as fascinated as I am by it, it's almost incomprehensible to me that this happens unless I were to see it happening. But I envision at nighttime this beam of light coming down like some sort of like I mentioned, a plotter or a cutter that comes down and does this pattern. And then where does this come from? What's it all about?
Well, again, there's a lot of controversy about this. And it really has to do with what people's comfort zone is. And many people in the UK are uncomfortable with the idea that this might come from another place. There is also a relationship with the earth. I think there's a dialogue going on. It isn't just sort of a cookie cutter that drops down. There is a reason, almost a communication between the planet and whatever this celestial force is. Because some of the formations have been religious symbols, like a Celtic cross.
Right.
This summer, there was a very beautiful Hindu swastika with the 4 dots on the corners. There have been very weird shapes that are hard to decipher, scripts and languages, alphabets that are completely unknown. Some of it has
symbology.
A lot of symbology, but also language that simply is not known here.
Do you think that there's a message that's being transmitted here somewhere? Is there some sort of hidden meaning to this? I mean, I'm sure that we can go any way we want to go with that. Sacred geometry and the logic of mathematics, I think, are the basic core structure of the universe. I think there's a mathematical construct that's there. We can see it in the musical scales, we can see it in the alignment of the planets, we can see it in any number of different areas. When we look at this, this precision, I can't get over the precision. I mean, this is something that has a real repetitive pattern to it. What do you think the message is here, and how are we to interpret these?
I would say the particular singular message is harmony.
Interesting.
Harmony with nature, harmony with life in general, and also that there are obviously forces that are trying to communicate with us. I mean, I personally believe in the other side, that there are spiritual beings on the other side that try to communicate or are present. In Ireland, there's lots of stories about fairies and fairy forts, the old ring forts.
Right.
And the Irish talk about the other side as some people talk about the weather. It's just a given.
Right.
But we in the Western modern world have, pushed that away, and we know about it, but we don't experience it, we don't honor it. And I think the same is true even though many people believe in UFOs and people have seen sightings, we haven't fully integrated that relationship. And I think we're getting messages both from the Earth and from the sky.
Interesting. Is this a contemporary phenomena? In other words, are we seeing these now because we have the ability to, and I mean that within a span of, say, whenever we're airborne, 75 years, whatever that may be. Are these a phenomenon that has only been available to us because we were able to see them from above? In other words, before the helicopter, we couldn't see them. Have they always been there?
I can't say they've always been there, but there's a recorded crop circle in a wood block cutting that goes back, I think, to the 1500s. And they used to believe it was the devil. And so all of a sudden, they would lose crops. Yes, the problem when the crop is flattened, it can't be harvested. And so they thought the devil was messing. And this is still part of the idea with farmers. Farmers react because they think there's some young people with nothing better to do.
Right, and they're just being mischievous.
And they're losing money. There are farmers who are a little more enlightened, and they realize that there's meaning to this, so they have harmonized with the situation in the sense that they actually collect entrance fees, and some of those entrance fees then go to things like supporting cancer research.
So interesting, that's great, I'm glad to hear that. Interestingly enough, when you, have you been inside a crop circle?
Many times, yeah.
And what's it like when you enter into them? Does it feel different to you?
Okay, here we go. So the first time I entered a crop circle, I was invited to go to the UK by a friend of mine from the US who was living in England. And I went into this crop circle, and you walk down the tram lines. As I was walking down the tram lines, all of a sudden I felt like a wind or a heat. I almost had to lean into this.
Oh, so you felt some force pushing against you?
Force that I had to counter. And I got to the edge of this thing, and I took my shoes off because this was sacred ground. And I walked in there, and all of a sudden, all kinds of phenomena happened. All of a sudden, I heard sounds. And I heard a sound that went whoosh, whoosh, and I think that was something that was caught in a timeless sense in terms of how the crop was laid down in that kind of fast manner. And other things started to happen. My first experience, which was 20 years to the year in 1996, is still the most remarkable of the experiences I've had. And I had other phenomenal experiences in there. One was going to the center of this formation, and I think you have that other, this is the picture here, this is the first crop circle.
This is the first one that you went to?
Yeah. And so when I walked into it, you see something fascinating there. There are these two crescent moons.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if they're supposed to represent suns or earths. But when I went to where that cluster of people are in the middle, I looked up and I thought I saw the moon over my head.
Interesting.
And instead what I saw was the earth. And I had the experience of standing on the moon looking at the earth. And then a voice inside my head said, "This is the future earth." What I discovered was that time is not horizontal. Time is vertical. And that started to change my whole orientation about everything.
So the feeling you got entering into the crop circle was a transformative kind of experience. This is something that is life-changing, and you could feel a sense of electricity in the air, a sense of some sort of like static charge? Or
Absolutely, and this happens. A lot of cameras the batteries would get drained. People have gone to crop circles and compasses would spin, magnetic compasses would spin.
It would not be able to orient.
They would just keep going around and around and around.
And so magnetics have a problem. So magnetic camera, digital cameras, compasses.
Even airplanes, sometimes low-flying airplanes flying over crop circles, the instrument panel will be affected at a height of hundreds of feet. So this is not just on the ground. This is something
that extends
upward.
So because I've had experiences where I've heard that like you mentioned earlier, that it was sort of a conversation between the cosmos, perhaps, and the Earth in concert with each other. So they were able to create this almost like in a conversation form.
Right. Yeah.
And that would sort of create this sort of this tubular void or something, or some energy zone that's surrounding this thing.
Yes.
And just that process in itself is so phenomenal. And yet these are large things. This has got to be something that is, people over there, they just say, oh yeah, the new crop circle. I mean, if I saw this, I would be like blown away. I wouldn't know what to think. I wouldn't know what to think about it.
Yeah, the average person in England doesn't have an attraction to them. What you find are a lot of foreign people. I used to bring many of my Swiss students over for a week, and we go crop circle hunting together. Mm-hmm. And I'd hire a helicopter, and we do the whole thing to be able to get the perspective.
Right.
The thing is, with a crop circle, when you're standing, it's like this table. You're just seeing a field. You have no idea what the design is. You have to get up 50 feet or 100 feet, depending on the size of the crop circle.
That's why I was asking earlier if we didn't know about these years ago, because we weren't able to get that perspective.
Right. It could be. I mean, the Nazca Plains, they are also phenomenon. They go back hundreds and hundreds of years that only have that perspective from above.
So you think that this is a sort of, and how often do these happen? I mean, they're very random, right?
How often? Well, they're happening yearly and have been really spotted since the early 70s, but there were only a couple then. And then starting in the 80s, there were more until the mid-90s. So in the mid-90s, all of a sudden in England, there were like 140 crop circles. Now, they weren't all genuine, but there were 140. And then around that same period of time in the 90s, crop circles started to appear in Italy, Germany, Switzerland, Czechoslovakia. And as more were showing up on the continent, less were showing up in England. But the ones in England tend to cluster in this one county called Wiltshire. And there are these two, most extraordinary stone structures. One is called Avebury, which is the largest ring standing stone. There's a town in the middle of this. And the other is the famous Stonehenge. But there will be particular fields that almost every year you will find a crop circle.
Is there a latitudinal kind of rationale behind where they occur? In other words, the band of the globe, the sort of the longitudinal coordinates of where they occur only at a certain latitude around the globe within a band? Or is that not a significant?
It's a good, I know that's true of pyramids, that people have charted that from South America through Egypt into China.
Finding the same similar band. Right?
I've never had any notion of that with crop circles.
And why do you think they occur where they do? Why do they occur in the Midwest of the United States?
There's some thinking there that whoever's making them wants us to see them. And if you're in Kansas, it's the middle of a field and you've got one or two people driving a truck by every once in a while, who's going to see them? Well, this is a form of a communication. They want to communicate. And that's why there are many different designs.
So when we look back at some of the symbols we've seen in sacred geometry or all the old Celtic symbols or whatever, do we see a common thread between what was created as a Celtic symbol and what we see in a crop circle? Is there some sort of natural harmonization of the two? Or is one representative of the other?
The Celtic symbols to me do have a basis of what you're talking about in terms of precision and flow, in terms of
it's that sort of geometric.
Yeah. But you wouldn't find that as a particular theme in crop circles.
Interesting.
The geometry's there, but not the Celtic design is what I'm saying.
What amazes me is the precision. Lots of things, you could think of a tornado, you could think of an earthquake having a pattern, whatever, but these seem to be predetermined almost, as if they're by design, to express something. And I wonder what the symbols actually are saying. There's got to be some sort of message in each particular symbol. Now, you mentioned harmony. Harmony may be a topic that sort of overrides all of them as a sort of a collective body of work or whatever. But do they individually express an emotion, or are they timed to world events? Are they timed to natural phenomena? Are they timed to things that we should be seeing at that point in life? Is there some sort of historical relevance to when they appear?
There's a long answer to this question.
Oh, I'm sorry, but
no, that's all right. I'll try to get it in stages. So Yes, for example, each one of these formations has a particular bit of information. The one that we just looked at with the crescent moons and the two suns, that was shown to Hopi Native American elders. And when they saw that, they cried. And they said, this is part of our prophecy, that when the picture of the sun and the moon appear together in the same place, this is going to be the beginning of a change. And the Hopis see that the large changes will be coming forward. In terms of messages that have come, there was a very interesting message that was sent by the American government into deep space from Costa Rica. And it was a message that showed that we were on this fifth planet from the sun, the size of our bodies, our DNA composition, and was set out as a binary code into deep space in 1974. That returned as a crop circle in 2001 with the exact same images that were sent out by us into deep space.
Wow. So that implies that someone is receiving what we're sending and they're beaming it back.
Right.
I've heard that, you know, the universe, the cosmos, is filled with radio signals, and that the idea that all radio signals that have been generated from whenever radio was first met have gone out into the universe and are out there somewhere and could potentially bounce back at some point in time. Like there's comments about famous speeches that are sitting out there in space somewhere. They're waiting to hit a planet. You know, they're going out in a expansive format, hit something, bounce back, and reflect back to us. Sort of in an odd idea of time travel in some way. But these coming back to us in that response, that's got to say something.
Well, that wasn't just an echo. That was some other civilization saying, we read you, we copy,
It's like,
and we're going to tell you that we live on these two planets. We have a larger head, we have 3 strands of DNA, and we have more silica in our bodies than you do. And that came down as a crop circle and was then deciphered.
so do you think this is interplanetary communication,
Absolutely.
a representation
and
of that?
perhaps even intergalactical.
And where do those that think about this, what is the general consensus about what is being taught here? What is being told? Is this just a connection?
We are not alone.
Ah, well, I never thought we were. And I think that's fascinating. And this is what is one of the most intriguing pieces about this, because what we see here, we recognize as a geometric construct. We can see angle, proportion, degree, all of the major components that are part of geometry are there. You know, we can pick any degree and we can find the coordinates there, and this is the basis for architecture, it's the basis for the way the cathedrals are built, it's the basis for the Nautilus shell, the list goes on forever. But the fact that there is this geometric precision indicates that this is coming from a very intelligent life form,
Right.
and also that there is it's not just acknowledgement, I think, it's also, there's got to be some sort of subtext to this, some sort of messaging that comes through.
I agree, and I think part of this has to do with bringing us back into our own ancient cultures that understood and used this precision in terms of geometry, in terms of building. The circle itself was the basis for all construction in Egypt and India. All the cathedrals that were built in the Middle Ages are all based with the same ideas and with the same precision. And in a way, modern society has forgotten some of the wisdom and some of the precision that was used in those constructions.
And like the circle, to me, as an astrologer, has always been representative of the continuity of life, the cyclical nature of life. It's in some form, it's representative of the cycles of life, the beginning and ending, the opening and closing, the alpha and the omega, as well as the other symbolic representation of a community of mankind, a pool of circles of friends, circles of relationships, a circle of humanity. It all comes down to that same sort of symbol. But when we break it out into this, there's much more information. This is a much deeper kind of conversation or message that's being sent.
Yeah, I think you're right. The symbol has such unique properties as any symbol we have. I think it's the most unique. And then with this idea, there are layers of information. You can study what happens to the actual physical properties of the plants. You can study what happens in the soil. A lot of that has been actually under investigation for decades with remarkable discoveries. So we know that there is a mechanism here. We know that there is an intelligence that's involved. And we also know there's a bit of humor, because what happened this past summer, we all have heard about Brexit, when the British people voted to leave Europe. That very day, a crop circle appeared of 2 sharks chasing these 2 little fish.
And it was in a circle and precise.
And it was in a circle, and everybody in the crop circle community just thought that was the biggest hoot, because this is exactly what we're doing. We're sort of chasing each other and eating each other up.
Right, going backwards. It was also the day that the English were eliminated from the Euro Cup via Iceland, which I thought was classic, but that's that's an aside.
Right.
The thing is that's remarkable to me is that the circle, perhaps more than any other geometric form, is universal. I think the symbols by themselves are recognizable by any person on the planet, or even by any species on the planet. There's something about symbols that is not determined by language. Like an A in English may be different than a language than that same character in Russian or Chinese or whatever. Symbols sort of transcend that construct because they are universal. That's like we see the universal no parking symbol or whatever. Because they're symbols, they are recognized by all people regardless of their dialect or their origin. I think that this sort of brings that to mind and says there's a message here for all of humanity. What I'm wondering is why they are only in that part of the world, or perhaps are there other places of the world we don't know about?
Well, yes, they've appeared in rice paddies in Indonesia. They've appeared in Boston, outside MIT, on the Charles River when it froze over on a thin sheet of ice that you couldn't walk on. They've appeared in sand in Saudi Arabia.
So interesting.
There are many ways that these forms have appeared, and whether they're in sand or not, the precision is always there. It's an extraordinary level of precision.
That's what I find to be the most fascinating piece. It's not as if this is just some sort of random thing. As I mentioned earlier, an earthquake will cut a jagged line through the earth. A tornado will do certain things. Hurricanes will do their damage wherever they do it. But they don't have this is almost a design with intention.
Yes, and a lot of the designs in the early 2000s, you saw a lot of fractals. And so fractals have to do with this unending continuation of shapes.
Like the Fibonacci numbers.
The Fibonacci numbers. And also there was something called the Mandelbrot set. And the Mandelbrot set was Benoit Mandelbrot's way of actually taking chaos theory, and he created an image of that when he worked for IBM, and that appears as a crop circle just across the road from Stonehenge.
Unbelievable. They really are fascinating things, and I wonder why we don't hear more about them. And then we haven't got much time left, but real quick, what do you think?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the powers to be don't want us to know that we're not alone.
That's a good answer. A fascinating discovery. I think, we've just scratched the surface in a very short time, but the idea of a crop circle is worth your intellectual pursuit. There's something very fascinating here. A message is being made clear to us that we need to pursue and not forget. I appreciate you coming in today very much, Peter, all the way from Ireland.
Great.
Peter Tabb. Thank you very much.
See you again.
Okay. Take care.